All right. Well, thank you very much. Today, I have the pleasure to have a conversation with Armando Placencia. Thank you, Armando, for taking the time to be here and
Of
share your journey with us. Uh,
course. My
so I
pleasure.
got to learn about you through a friend of us who owns a bike shop right here in the area. So you are
Okay. No, best bikes.
best bike shop. So you're definitely a bike enthusiast.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how, we came together. And here we are. So we're gonna have a short conversation. We want to hear
Okay.
everything about yourself,
Sure.
what you do, what you have done, and any advice that you may have for, anybody who's gonna watch this video. So
Sure.
Armando, I know you used to work at Caltech. You've
Yeah.
been a cloud engineer and architect for years.
Yeah.
Um, Please tell us how you got to Caltech. How was your journey through the process to getting hired at Caltech, and what were you doing for them at the very beginning?
Sure. I think the genesis of any career is a desire to understand and have curiosity. And to that extent, I can sum up my experiences in IT in about 30 seconds, which is um, the greatest gift my mother ever gave me is she granted me the opportunity to walk to the library and get a library card.
Hmm.
And so what I would do when I was 9 years old, and I always had an affinity for technology. At least I had an interest. I had an interest in it so much that I would beg, borrow, and steal whatever quarters and coins I could find to go rent time at the library to use whatever computers networks was in place. And what I would do as I was waiting for time at the library is I would randomly pick a section, randomly pick an aisle, randomly walk through those aisles with my eyes closed, and I'd pick a book, and it could be any subject matter. In fact, I oftentimes wouldn't know what aisle or section I was in, and I would pick up the book and start reading it. And I was enamored by the knowledge and the experience and the perspective of the author, regardless of the subject matter. So I think when you approach technology, you have to approach it with the same vigor, which is to say that there's thousands of millions of use cases possible, and you kind of have to find and weave your way into areas of interest that you care about or that you're concerned about. Mine has always been data architecture, data structures, programming, and software design. And the reason why I kind of give you that little anecdote is that you have to approach technology regardless of where we are in the change spectrum, because let's agree, over the last 50 plus years, technology is changed profoundly.
Yeah.
And the one key that needs to be ingrained in every individual who chooses a career in technology is curiosity and interest, to say, how does it work? Why does it work that way?
Mhm.
What is my understanding? And the other thing too that I would kind of suggest, and how I got to Caltech, was I would ask, is there a different or better or unique way of doing that? And I've been a cloud architect. I'm professionally certified in Oracle OCI Cloud. I have professional designation in GCP, and I'm a AWS certified engineer as well. So I've done all the clouds. I've done all the infrastructure. I did 25 plus years at Universal Studios as the principal architect, building infrastructure architecture and supporting all the different business units. Um, but I I think the regardless of where I have professionally provided services, I think the most important question one can ask, and then, maybe it's germane to your audience, is how can I be of service? How can I add value? How can I augment my special interests or skill sets? And how can I be of service? And so I think that to me is a more important question than how one becomes a resource, an asset in any organization whatsoever, whether it be telecommunications, media, finance, entertainment, and or technology. So I'm not sure if I answered it directly, except to say that everybody just has to find their individual passion and really make it their lifeblood. And then once they can do that, understand how they add that extra special touch, that special seasoning. for me, it was writing software, building infrastructure, building metadata, databases and such. And everyone does it differently. But I think the most important thing is you have to identify, first of all, what it is innate in you that you love, and how do you go about providing that as a service. How do you germane that? How do you prove that you can implement solutions? And how do you become part of a system that's already running? Because you really can't go into an organization regardless of where it is. And I've worked, many Navy projects. I've been involved in many technology. I've Secret Service, classification, clearance. I think the most important thing is you come in with an open slate, and you say to yourself, okay, how can I transform to become a component in the system, as opposed to trying to be, trying to be the system itself.
You're right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. No, that is amazing. That's great. And that's definitely from a like a personal perspective. You're providing a lot of great advice, great suggestions on how
sure,
to come in, right, and how to become of service, how to adjust to a system. But as we know right now, there's this monumental change in the
sure.
tech model is advancing so rapidly. It always it's always advancing, but I guess
Uh,
lately with these whole latest technologies, there's language models
sure, of course.
moving
Yeah, yeah.
so fast, right? And a lot of people are being displaced, or they probably will be
Of course.
displaced
Yeah, yeah. Of
because
course.
perhaps certain technologies will minimize their work, or you're not gonna need as many people as you used to, right? So in today's world, how do you think somebody can adjust? What kind of training, what kind of mentality, how
Sure.
can anybody who's looking for a position or a new position or who's already working somewhere, but perhaps thinking, oh my God, things are shaking over here. How can I just become more valuable to the organization? Or if I get displaced, how can I become more valuable for another organization? What will be your advice?
Well, I think ultimately all of it, what all of AI attempts to do, all the different language models, regardless of regardless of the implementation, at the API layer, you kind of have to think about what it is the model is trying to implement. And I think the way one could approach it is to say, listen, if I'm looking at building an AI system that is going to try to correlate all the metadata of infrastructure or databases. So the idea becomes, how do I build components that can attach to, say, any database in the world, and then create a generic understanding of what the structure of those data models are, the relationships of the data models, the attributes of those data models. And then is essentially what I would think about doing is building a generic implementation that accesses, for example, in a database, you might have a view, and you might have uh, hundreds of implementations of a database.
Mhm.
MySQL, NoSQL, Postgres. So what you want to do is you want to understand the underlying structures, and then you want to bring the understanding of those structures into a generic abstraction layer where you can tell the AI engine, hey, by the way, in here's what I want to determine. I want to determine if there's any correlation of the underlying data. You know, here's where my data resides, and my data might reside in a file system, might reside in a database, might reside in 100 different implementations. So I guess to answer your question, what I would recommend any individual doing is understanding design patterns.
Okay.
There is a specific design patterns in place to for example, the world, if you were building a GPS based application, you would want to understand how geospatial algorithms work. And
Mhm.
you'd want to be able to say, well, I'm building a tracking system to track my packages in motion. So at any point in time, I could figure out where my, from a logistics and workflow perspective is, where is this asset that I care about? So you want to really be able to spend a lot of time with the geospatial systems. But the challenge right now is that there's hundreds of different design patterns you can do. You can create vector systems. You can create the geospatial systems. There's hundreds of different kinds of systems out there, in order to be able to model and take advantage of AI there. So what I think someone should do is to select a platform and an infrastructure that has access to all those components. And Oracle, for example, just as an example of one of the many types of infrastructures or technologies, Oracle allows you to, Oracle at this point is a massive infrastructure. It's they own TikTok now. They own everything you could ever imagine, like the seventh largest corporation in the world. From a single SQL prompt, from a single individual language, you could access all of you can access and build any kind of use case you need without having to write specialized code. Say if I wasn't building a component, if I wasn't building a system, um, and I was running it in Python or a third generation, fourth generation language, one of the things that I want to do is uh, try to reduce the amount of code you have to implement. And
Mhm.
if it can all be implemented in a single nucleus layer with a single language, that would be how one could take advantage of a single language accessing every possible repository, accessing every possible use case, and then be able to say, from a workflow perspective, I just need to know one language. I let the infrastructure know how to go about traversing and accessing data in this format or this structure for this specific mean. So really kind of think of what's the from a technical debt perspective, how would you go about for a single individual having to limit his knowledge and experience um, to be able to access the greatest variance of technologies. And I think one of many use cases you could do with AWS, with Redshift, with a number of those tech stacks, or you could do it with Oracle. The thing
Mhm.
is you strategically you want to say what's the least number of languages I need to learn and understand inherently to
Okay.
access the greatest number of use cases that I could then say I'm capable of building an application that supports every type of business scenario that you might have or need or want.
Okay. Will you go back to school to learn more about technology in order to acquire a better job, or are you more in the camp of, what a lot of people today kind of like talk about, which is, like it's kind of not, it's not impossible, but it's very hard to package knowledge into a career, right? For something that we don't even know where we're going to be 2, 3 years from now. And if that's the case, what do you recommend people to learn in order to stay ahead? Is there any
Well,
like
I think
foundational models, foundational knowledge, wisdom that you will say, you know what, in this world, you should learn X, and that will carry you through the future?
well, I don't think in today's present state, I don't think it's a matter of becoming an expert in any one individual technology.
Mhm.
I think if I was up and coming, if I was graduating college or university, or if I hadn't had any kind of professional training, I think that the best um, uh, mechanization based on my experience, that I would suggest is that someone join an open source project.
Mm.
And then from that open source project, become a collaborator and be able to determine what tech stack is being used by this open source project that might have 100,000 or 1 million followers, and become a resource that can read through code, that can implement changes, that can become part of a community. So
Mhm.
what happens is that open source tool set, implementation is going to be potentially used by hundreds of thousands of companies. If I become acclimated enough that I become a leading contributor to an open source project that is being used tremendously, do I not have inherent knowledge to be able to say to those 100,000 companies, I am a lead contributor? I
Yeah.
can come in and hit the door running. I can tell you exactly if you're implementing this solution, how to go about implementing it better. And
Yeah.
so from a software perspective, I would say if you want to have a presence in the industry, for build and become part of an actual community, learn from others. And that's the one deficit that I see a great deal is that developers spend years and years honing and becoming an expert in a specific language without understanding how that language is being implemented. Because from an AI model perspective, it really no longer is a matter of understanding how to code anything.
Right.
Because to be perfectly honest with you, the AI engines are becoming so intelligent. Agentic agents are literally writing all the code. So what you basically need is maybe you need 5% of the actual talent resources that you used to have.
Hmm.
Now you just need someone who has enough knowledge of being able to look at code to say, did the AI components have it right?
Right.
Does this actually work? And
Right.
have enough knowledge in coding to be able to be, yes, move this through, migrate this, into this workflow, and let's start testing this in a very small scale, and make sure that it doesn't have any major repercussions. And so it again, it's no longer about being an expert in any language or going to school. I really think the only thing that will keep young resources employed and essentially lead to professional success is building communities,
Mm.
building a network of people
Yeah.
that you trust, that can support you in terms of saying, yeah, he is a fantastic resource. He knows his stuff, and I can highly recommend him from any number of projects.
Hmm.
And so I think that would really be. It's no longer the case of individual expertise. It's about community involvement. It's about being able to say, listen, this open source project implements these languages. I'm very familiar with how to implement code, yada yada yada. And because let's face it, the technology is going to change every minute of the day.
Yeah.
What is it going to change? The network and the experience that you have being able to say,
Yeah.
I mean, the greatest attribute I can give to an individual if we're having a discussion is I want to see his humility, and I
Mhm.
want to see his vulnerability. If
Mhm.
if if I'm talking to an engineer, regardless of whether he's my senior, my junior, my equal, or a subordinate, I want that person to be able to say, listen, tell me what your strengths are and tell me what your weaknesses are. How
Mhm.
open are you to hear criticism? How open are you to be able to assist me? I don't have pride. I don't want to have pride, because making sure that you implement software that meets the business need is far greater than my desire to feel accolades.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, look, I don't know, and I need your help. So let's work together. Leave your pride at the door, right? We're here to build a solution, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of times the individuals who succeed in technology are the ones who can um, you know put their feelings aside and think about others first.
Mhm.
There's certainly going to be enough world-class all-star engineers who have mastery of hundreds of technologies and hundreds of languages and have a lot of experience. But honestly, do you want to work with somebody that walks into into a product release that says, I wrote all this code, none of you have any reason to be in this meeting, I'm the
Right.
author of all of this? Or to
Yeah.
say, you know what, I, there's only so much that I can know at any one moment in time, and
Yeah.
I need your skill set. I need your energy. I need your vigor. I need your interest. I need your friendship. I need your networking. Let's build a solid team aside from technology and let the technology work for itself.
Yeah.
Teams
So
will always win.
yeah, to wow, put all that together. I mean, it's a lot. You
It
share a lot.
can be.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So being humble, being vulnerable, but also having to, what they usually call the four C's, which is critical thinking, being
Sure.
creative, collaborating, right?
Yeah.
Being able to communicate. Because
Sure.
as you said, like these models are going to be able to code pretty much. They're going to be able to code everything. And maybe you'll be more like the red team that comes in and kind of like fixes the code, but you have
Sure.
to work in teams. You have to be able to collaborate, to communicate, and really being humble and vulnerable is an asset. So
It's
now
a
we
skill.
have we have this world where you have Claude 5.2, you have OpenAI coming out with a model every other
Oh
week.
yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
mean,
just like,
you
yeah.
know, like crazy. And then you have Chinese models that are very advanced as well. They're doing amazing. And it's always like, like something is new, something is better.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna have world models and you have, so many autonomous vehicles with the latest and craziest technologies out there. Where are we gonna be in 5 years, according to Armando Placencia? Where are we heading? I guess maybe the answer
Yeah.
is nobody really knows, but just give me a crazy, crazy answer, something for us to like, you know, just like grab from.
Okay, so what I would say to any kind of organization, where however they exist within the hierarchy of that organization, if you want to survive the next iteration of technology, take a step back and understand your products,
Mhm.
understand your the use cases, the business value of your product, and go back and ask yourself, you know, um, how would you approach um, a language model that you are testing, the first thing you want to do is be very clear that you understand your infrastructure, that you understand your technology, that you understand your data models, that you understand your data attributes, that you understand the relationships of those attributes. For
Mhm.
example, if you were trying to say, I have 100 different systems in my ERP, and I really want to be able to figure out how do I go about accessing all those 100 systems from a heterogeneous perspective in
Mhm.
order to get the clearest, truest version of answer that I need to solve this question? The first thing you'd want to do is, well, do we have an inventory of our infrastructure? And on that infrastructure, what is it, where does the underlying data reside? Not only does it where to reside, how do I access it? Now that you know where to access it, how is the data broken up in segments?
Mhm.
Um, what is that segment? What is that segment value? Down to the point of saying, oh, this is the employee record, and these are the attributes of that employee record, and this is the relationships that this employee record has with the data models that are in place. Whether your data logic exists in a JSON data structure, whether it's relational, non-relational, wherever it happens to be, if you don't understand how your data is intermingled, what how you would go about saying, for example, let's go back 30 years in technology, the data model,
Mhm.
the metadata, the
Mhm.
data about your data. If you can build an organization that cares about that first, so that when you approach your language models, past, present, and future, to be able to say, here is, let's go back to a 30-year-old data dictionary. This is my understanding of the attributes of my business data.
Mhm.
And when I want you to correlate, a logical and or physical relationship between data in this system to that system, I want you to use this metadata as the bridge to be able to say this asset is also known as X, Y, and Z. By
Mhm.
the way, you might have that attribute Z in another system, and now you have a logical possible connection between those two inherent systems that you then want to do. You want to build a component that scans through that data to make sure, hey, degree of coefficient, how much certainty do I have that this Z attribute in system A is potentially the same attribute in system Z? And can I scan through that data and then be able to assert that, yeah, I have a 95-degree confidence that the exact same values?
Mhm.
You don't know whether your data has been duplicated or that data exists elsewhere across hundreds of systems. But the
Mhm.
future AI needs to be able to have that roadmap. You wouldn't get in a car and drive to New York without an understanding of what what roads exist, what freeways, what highways,
Mhm. How
where
you
you
gonna
get,
get there? Yeah.
how are you going to get there?
Yeah.
And honestly, regardless of the future implementation of any technology, let's go back to basics.
Mhm.
How would AI is not a panacea. You need to do your homework before you approach allowing those systems to get access to your critical data.
Mhm.
And you need to be able to impose a certain degree of certainties to say you can access this, but you can't access that.
Mhm.
Because, and then you want to be able to make sure that the models that you implement are localized models that exist outside of the that sit outside of known public, NLPs. Because the reality is if I'm going to expose my mission critical business data, I want to make sure that it's a closed system.
Mhm.
None of this data gets out. Any learning happens in a protected capacity. And once I have a degree of confidence, then I can potentially expose it. But as business and organizations um, look toward using AI, data sovereignty is critical. You got to guarantee that none of your data will ever be exposed or accessible, open to the public. The minute you cut and paste a piece of data in an, Chat GPT, OpenAI, or Grok, or any kind of AI implementation, then data is no longer yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I say all this with a grain of salt, which is build localized systems.
Yeah.
And then once you have enough understanding, then you could figure out how to continue to build closed systems.
Wow, that's amazing. Armando, so you've worked in projects with the Navy.
Sure.
You were
Yeah.
in Caltech for many years. You're an
Yeah.
expert. You have a lot of experience under your belt. What is next for you?
Um, I think there's a lot of great work that's being done in many areas, but the area that really continues to bring me back to focus is databases.
Okay.
Majority of the data that exists in this world in some database or other,
Mhm.
whether and I think um, what I find often is that developers who don't understand the most successful critical programming language, which is SQL.
Mhm.
They place themselves in a degree of vulnerability
Mm.
because almost every engine that's out there, from NoSQL products to relational products, just everything else, everything interfaces from Hadoop to an AWS stack. You have real time streaming data. Everything that you could ever possibly touch, an interface exists to write SQL. And I think if that's the case, I would concentrate on being an expert in how to
Mm.
build those interfaces with a single language. There's
Wow.
tens of thousands of languages out there. Do you
Mhm.
really want to buy a company that has 90% of their critical assets involved in a language you've never heard about,
Mhm.
that you don't know about? Where the lead engineer has refused to become part of an effort to standardize. I think as from an organization perspective, you don't want to put all of your all of your tens of thousands of years of engineering work hours into languages that you can't implement and change. And I think if you redirect your focus to languages like, you know, eh, eh, from my experience anyways, SQL is the one language I can access. I mean, I can write Python, I can write, any of the languages. I've been a full stack engineer. You know, this is an interesting discussion because there's actually I have expertise in something in the no code, low code framework called Application Express. It's been around for 35 plus years. Maybe in a future discussion, if you want to
Yeah.
hear how developers and engineers don't have to become language experts in any one thing, and they can access the world's, their business needs through no code, low code. Certainly I can have that discussion in a future step. But if you understand your if you understand your business needs, we're getting to a point where you shouldn't have to become an expert in 20 different languages. The days of being able to stare at thousands of lines of CSS, or hundreds of thousands of lines of JavaScript to try to figure out where the bug is. Those days are gone, to the extent that if you're not performing maintenance and you're moving and you're building new componentries, it's enough that the abstraction layer understand how to implement code. You might need to look at it on occasion,
Mhm.
especially if you're coordinating upgrades to the repo and you're implementing specific languages or components. You would need to have a good understanding of the language then. But 99% of the time, you don't have to. You
Yeah.
know, and I think in the no code, low code space, the average, not the average, someone who understands the business rules is able to implement a great deal more value to the organization by understanding how their business works and then applying that to a no code framework. they're able to build systems in seconds, in minutes,
Mhm.
whereas engineers who understand hard level code, who don't understand the business, it take them weeks or months, and
Yeah.
you're typically going to have a lot of failed projects. What you
Yeah.
want to get is you want to get your core business team involved in software development
Mhm.
to be able to say, you don't have to be an engineer. You just have to have enough understanding of your problem. And then let's work with somebody who understands how to either transpose that
Mhm.
or give you, a couple hours of you basic here's what you do in this case, here's what you do in that case,
Yeah.
and then let the business start building systems.
Yeah. So they
So
should
I
basically have
it
a mutual understanding. You have the business side understanding, a little bit of the software side,
yeah.
and also the business side has to be understood in order to create a complete system.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to continue working in the no code, low code space,
Okay.
um, because in seconds you could build infrastructure, architecture, full stack, everything you could ever dream of.
Yeah.
Like in 10 seconds, in 5 clicks, I could build you a system that would take months for the average developer to build. And because I don't actually write it,
Yeah.
I basically declare what it is that I want to implement, and I use an AI interface to be able to say, hey, here's what I want to build.
Yeah.
Help me understand, help me how to build the APIs in order to invoke these components to occur. And then once I like it, I repeat it.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take you on that. Maybe next time we talk about no code and low code, and maybe
Sure,
we can actually build something live. We can just share our screens,
sure.
and maybe you can just build something, and then we can share it to the world, see how you
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
very much, Armando. It's been great.
Okay.
We definitely gotta do it again. So at least we have a chapter 2 to this, which is the no code, low code conversation. And
Yeah, 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 Chris.
yeah, and I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Oh, no worries. Hey, listen, have yourself a wonderful afternoon. And, just if I could leave you with one parting thought,
Yeah.
um, which is for all developers who are desiring a career in IT, or maybe you're on the precipice of ending your pseudo retirement and such.
Mhm.
Never allow your curiosity to wane. Allow your curiosity and a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
you know, Learn something new every day. And just keep hitting that keyboard. There's a wonderful world of technology, regardless of what your skill set is, and everyone can be a contributor.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you very much. That's great.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Armando.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a good one. Thanks again for the chat.